You'd go to a restaurant that sells fried chicken and with fried rice, which is a much heftier meal, which would fill an individual more. That would be about $5, $6. So you could see where people would be like, "Oh my gosh, what's cheaper? What's gonna fill me more?"
The views expressed in this podcast do not represent the views of the Organization of American States, its Secretary General, or the member states. Keep listening to find out more of this new episode.
Welcome to season 2 of The Zone, a podcast that serves as a platform for constructive dialogue amongst those who live in the Adjacency Zone on relevant issues with a local perspective, presented by young people from Belize and Guatemala, under the coordination of the OAS office in the Adjacency Zone and with the support of the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation. We appreciate our audience tuning in for this conversation on the fight against hunger in rural communities. We'll kick off our conversation by exploring some of the major issues causing disruption in food supply chains, and we will discuss the work done by Plenty Belize and the Organization for the Development of Indigenous Maya from Guatemala in addressing hunger in our countries. Let's start by defining today's issue. Hunger is often defined as a short-term physical discomfort resulting from a chronic food shortages that in some cases become life-threatening because of a lack of food.
Another term that we most adequately understand is food insecurity, which according to the National Research Council of the United States refer to the limited unreliable access for food that are safe and nutritionally adequate.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. There's never too much information to know when talking about issues like this, as they also affect us in Belize and Guatemala.
We want to share some data which could be shocking, so that our followers have a better idea of what is happening around the world in relation to world hunger.
Let me start by mentioning that achieving hunger zero is the second of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The SDGs are a call to action for countries to come together and address social inequality issues such as hunger, which according to statistics affect 1 in 10 people worldwide.
Another relevant fact is that 1 in 3 people lack regular access to adequate food. I do think that these numbers are worth sharing, since this can spark action in anyone who's listening.
So now I'd like to focus on some of the issues that disrupt the food supply chains affecting people everywhere. So the first one is conflicts such as wars, disputes, or any other form of altercations between countries. For example, during conflicts, this causes great damages to farming lands, resulting in the destruction of agricultural assets and food reserves.
This is really important information for all us to know, especially since a high percentage of people suffering from chronic malnutrition lives in areas affected by armed conflict.
So what you just mentioned highlights the need for peaceful relations between neighboring countries. These sort of conflicts cause food shortages and cut civilians off from food supplies, which has been the case for conflicts such as Yemen, Syria, South Sudan, for instance. As our food supply is dependent on climate, we have been seeing extreme weather events in our region known as the dry corridor, which Guatemala is a part of.
Looking a little bit farther into it, the characteristics of the dry corridor are the month-long drought that farmers in this particular region face, followed by excessive rain.
From my understanding, the crops that are devastated include maize and bean crops, which can be considered primary staples in our diets.
However, we can think of ways to help vulnerable communities, not only to prepare but to build resilience against natural phenomena like El Niño.
So El Niño is actually, like you mentioned, a natural phenomenon. It's a bunch of weird patterns that affect agriculture, weird weather patterns that affect agriculture. And you're definitely right. Something that I thought is pretty cool is infrastructure such as bridges and proper irrigation systems are actually stuff that can withstand extreme weather, could definitely be a positive impact for people who harvest food.
Getting back to the main issue affecting food chain, we have food waste. Food waste is a big issue that we often see in market, and globally, 1/3 of the food produced each year is lost or waste.
If you've ever been on TikTok, there are actually so much videos of like people like throwing away food, wasting food. I know I once saw this video that this employee from one of these fast food chains, he actually exposed where he was working at, where what they actually go and do is they'd actually take the trays of all the food they have left over at the end of the day and just throw that into the garbage. And he exposed them for doing that, and he'd actually take home, try and give some of that extra food out to homeless people, and they didn't like that he was doing that. And it was in their policies that said that they weren't allowed to give out all this extra food that they had to homeless people. So they were like, we have to throw this food away. It's so like he got fired for exposing them. I just think that we have lots of these companies that have policies and are actively trying to not help people out by feeding them. It's insane.
No, indeed, I do definitely think that's a waste. And when it comes to this food waste, I do think that the best solution is for us to find ways for us to recover the food and prevent this from happening.
Yeah, and I think for this specific cause, innovation plays a big role where farmers can store food for weeks and months. We could see how tackling food hunger is key to the development of every country, as it is part of the ongoing cycle where food hunger is also linked with inequality and lack of education.
In terms of inequality, women are the ones who suffer. In some places, as part of their tradition, women often eat last after the family. Not going too far, this is something that we see every day. Here in Guatemala, I've seen it in different villages where you see all the men of the family eating at the table, then the kids, and then when you go to the kitchen, all the women are working there and some are. And after everyone has already eaten, then they start eating.
Statistics from the World Food Program in the USA reflect this by stating that 60% of the population that is food insecure around the world are women and girls. And now let's mention the word education. We have to talk about the connection or link between the lack of education and world hunger.
Education is a key. It shapes the mind of the young, which can in the future come up with innovative solutions for vital problems in the region by rethinking their approaches.
Something else that is part of the cycle of education and hunger is that undernutrition diminishes brain growth, thus affecting students' performance in schools. So it's really interesting to see how literally your diet can affect how you are performing in the classroom. You see, it's kind of, that is the cycle. Like if you're not eating well, you're not doing that well in school. If you're not doing that well in school, you don't get educated and finding out, oh, eating healthy is important to me for me to do good in school. And it just keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah, it's definitely ironic that in order for you to get a good education, you will need to have a good nutrition. But in order for you to get a good nutrition, you also need to have a good education.
Yep. It's a cycle.
Coming up, we have an informative material. So stay tuned and join us in our next segment.
Food deficiency disease. Starvation, malnutrition, and overnutrition are some of the main food supply-related problems our world faces today. This is due to the increasing population, unequal distribution of food, and the growing of cash crops instead of food in some developing countries. Starvation occurs when a human or another mammal does not receive enough energy in their diet. Therefore, to meet metabolic needs, the body starts to use stored fats and glycogen. When these are gone, the body starts to use available protein, and so our muscles are utilized. Our heart is also a muscle, and thus, this may seriously weaken our heart. Malnutrition is a little different from starvation, because malnutrition results from dietary imbalance. It may be due to an excess intake of nutrients over a period of time, or deficiency. Deficiency diseases also occur due to a lack of vitamins and minerals. We have discussed them in our previous videos. We now also know that a lack of dietary fiber results in constipation. Overnutrition occurs when a person consumes more energy than he or she can use up, so he becomes fat. Such a person is said to be obese, and this is one of the most common problems in developed countries. One of the main problems is the overconsumption of saturated fats and cholesterol, which increases the risk of coronary heart disease. This is dangerous because it has been estimated that on average, every 500 grams of fatty tissue requires a kilometer-long supply of blood vessels. More blood vessels to cover all the extra fat cells would mean our heart must beat many times more for the blood to reach the new vessels and regulate the cells. To conclude, Dietary imbalance may be due to economic constraints, poor eating habits, and unwillingness to follow nutritional guidelines. So next time, if you have a problem with your weight, do visit a nutritionist and get yourself a balanced diet plan.
I found it very interesting how it goes into show how developed countries obesity is a problem in those sort of places, and they made an interesting point of why it's really important to go see a professional about your nutrition and what you're doing in terms of your diet, because I feel like a lot of times if you're not really well versed or educated in what a well balanced diet is, it's really important to do your research and find out what that is and what that can be for me. And I feel like that is the cause for the video mentioned obesity and stuff like that.
Something funny here that, many persons are not aware of what they should be eating in order for them to have a good balanced diet, sorry. But then when you tell them that the best for you to go to a professional, the first thing they say is, I don't have money to buy everything I'm required to. So maybe they have an idea of what it's good and what's not, but they also have this false idea that you need a lot of money in order for you to eat properly.
I agree. There are lots of great alternatives. You don't have to buy the most expensive ham. You don't have to go buy this grade A lettuce. I feel like there are lots of great substitutes out there in order to maintain a healthy and balanced diet as well. And I think dismissing the idea of going to see a professional, it's not really the best idea. I think professionals are there and they are there for your well-being, really. Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with you.
We move on to talk about what is being done in the countries of Belize and Guatemala to achieve hunger zero.
In the case of Belize, we have an NGO called Plenty Belize, which has spearheaded projects in agriculture, health, nutrition, and education.
I'm aware that they have plenty of programs that focus on adapting food security to climate change, especially in the villages of Toledo. For those of you who may not know, Toledo is one of the southernmost districts in Belize that is home to the indigenous Mopan and Quechua Maya.
One of the projects that they have implemented is managed by women, and the goal is that 50% of what they produce is kept by the women, and the 25% is donated to local schools, feeding program, and the remaining 25% is sold to support the project cost and facilities.
I think that's pretty cool. That's an amazing initiative, and I love that it's being led by women in terms of that. Because like we mentioned before, women are usually the last to usually spearhead these sort of things. Also, I think another cool thing about the program is it's actually self-sustaining, so it's really independent. They really don't need to rely on any sort of sponsors and stuff or outside help, which is pretty cool. It's a really good example of self-sustaining projects as well. In terms of NGOs in Guatemala, we have the Organization for the Development of Indigenous Maya, or ODIM, which has various projects under the mission to enable access to healthcare and preventative health education.
Now, we've already seen a little bit of what the NGOs have done in Belize. Now, can you please go ahead and share with our listeners any specific project that they have worked on under the theme of World Hunger?
Sure thing. So ODIM has Healthy Mommy and Me. So this program targets malnutrition in rural Guatemala by enrolling mothers and their kids in monthly distribution of nutritional supplements, as well as education on child development and healthy nutrition using local food sources.
Oh, this is amazing. I love what they're actually doing, because they're not only educating on how they should be properly feeding their kids, but also on how they should be handling all their parenting.
Definitely. I think also what's really important is we do have a lot of single mothers, younger mothers in society. And, sometimes it's really scary to just become a mom one day and have so much responsibility, and you need to know so much about how to properly feed a child. So I love that they're actually providing the sort of resources that they might need in terms of whether that be letting them know what they should eat, what should a baby eat, because of course babies have their own diets as well. So it's all of this information is really important.
Most definitely. We're always saying that there's not a school for parents, but having this type of programs definitely help a lot.
Totally.
What's also unique is that ODIN has an annual fundraising adventure that takes you throughout Guatemala, all with the goal of providing affordable healthcare.
I think it's another great example of just these programs being self-sustainable, and I think it's an amazing and creative way to also get people into sharing, get people into knowing about what the program is, and it provides a great insight into people who might not know about the program and what it, and it's like, and I definitely think there comes a great feeling with knowing, hey, I'm actually funding something that's really amazing and helping so much people.
It's really cool. I do think that it's amazing the way they're actually doing it, because if you are supporting this by going through this trip through Guatemala, you're getting to know Guatemala, and you're also supporting this organization.
Yeah, see Guatemala, help Guatemala. So it was great to highlight how these organizations are helping in the fight against world hunger in Belize and Guatemala through different strategies. But I think we have a lot more to do as well. A lot of these organizations do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. I think it would be great to see them portrayed more in the media, on social media, on our all of our different social media sites, and just call people to do more, because there can never be enough help around the world.
Well, definitely. This would also be a call to all those organizations who can do something for our country.
Definitely, for sure.
I would also like to highlight that one of our sponsors, the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, is among the top 10 donors worldwide supporting for food production, industrial crops, agriculture, development, and livestock in Latin America to address world hunger.
Thank you for sharing that. The overall goal for the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation is to contribute to the effective realization of the human right to food and improve the living condition and food security of the rural population.
Coming up now, we bring you an informative section, and when we return, we will be finishing up today's conversation on world hunger.
For each and every one of us, food tells a story. It starts with agriculture, and our actions impact its journey each step of the way. We have one planet and are part of one system. We must work together to build a better future. We need to reconnect with nature and work as one. Let's rewrite the story of food for a better, more sustainable world. Our actions are our future.
So we just saw that video that highlights World Food Day, which is an annual event that brings together 150 countries worldwide to host different events and raise awareness for those suffering from hunger. What I really loved about that video was how the tagline, food tells a story, and like, how can we rewrite that story? Like, we have the opportunity to rewrite that story. I feel like that's something that really stuck with me in terms of, if you look at society and culture today, there are a lot of food trends. If you go on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, food trends are a thing. I don't know if you realized during mid-pandemic there was that with coffee food trend. I don't know if you know of any other food trends.
I do recall the ones of the coffee. I even tried myself.
You tried it yourself? Yeah. So it's really cool to see how much influence social media has. It would be amazing to see what we can do when we put that towards something good. So let's say we could go ahead and try and make a balanced diets trend, or let's make fruit salads trend, or healthier eating a trend, right? I'm sure lots of companies, organizations are in the position of power to go ahead and say, hey, let's go ahead and start this trend. Let's use this hashtag. Let's have more people try to incorporate this healthy living into their lifestyle by making this cool social media trend.
Indeed, I do recall seeing some professionals on TikTok that they are giving you like the recipes or different information that you can use to have a better diet.
Stuff like 5-minute recipes. Those are cute little trends that you could follow. It would be great to see more of that happening as well. The video also called to actually highlighted World Food Day. I know my Rotaract Club, what we actually went out and did was we actually all came together and we made breakfast, and we went out and gave breakfast out on World Food Day to a bunch of members of the community. So that's also another way people could, put in their little part to do good for the community and, overall diminish world hunger in the world, really.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't even know there was a food day. And I mean, it's sad to think that we needed to make a World Food Day in order for us to call the attention of everyone that having food is not it. I mean, we sometimes take it for granted.
Very important to be grateful. I think that we have a range of options of what we want to go out and do for lunch today. Like, hey, do you want to go to this restaurant and grab a burger? If you're not feeling a burger, we can go out for like, rice or something. Not many people have that sort of luxury. And I think a great step to realizing that this is a problem is also just being grateful for what you have on your plate today.
Totally agree with you. And looking on the, on our reality, I knew of a case of, I knew this kid. And during pandemic, I found him on the street and I was like, how have you been? And he was smoking. I'm like, why are you smoking? He was like 12 years old. Jeez. And he was like, because when I smoke, I don't have money to buy food. And then cigarettes are way cheaper than food. And with that, I can stay a day without eating anything.
That's so sad to hear about. I think I actually know of a similar story where, people in communities, when they aren't able to afford a proper diet, they rather prefer to go to bed on an empty stomach with some sort of like drugs in their system so it doesn't affect them as much. And I think that's even larger conversation to talk about. A lot of healthier foods are expensive. If you've ever been to a McDonald's, you'll quickly find out that their salads are way too overpriced. That's probably the most expensive menu item they have on there. And it's not something that should be. Healthy eating should not be something that should be so expensive. I know that in some communities around Belize, if you go into a restaurant or a lot of times a healthier food option would be like maybe like a fruit salad or something would be around like $8 or $9 a fruit salad. And then you go into like, in terms, you'd go to a restaurant that sells fried chicken and with fried rice, which is a much heftier meal, which would fill an individual more. That would be about $5-6. So you could see where people would be like, oh my gosh, what's cheaper? What's gonna fill me more, And it's this system designed to really not give you the healthy lifestyle that we all should be supporting each other with.
Most definitely. I mean, and this goes beyond just Belize or Guatemala. I'm pretty sure this is all around the world.
All over the world, yeah.
Discussing all these different cases, let's point out that not all hope has been lost. Despite the setback caused by the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, there are plenty of solutions that we can think about.
Yeah, there is an insightful article by Concern Worldwide USA that can guide our focus on possible solutions, helping us in reducing the statistics of world hunger by 2030.
The first solution is climate-smart agriculture, which consists of practices that include the diversification of crops and low-water sack garden that have proven to be beneficial for families in terms of nutrition and financial value.
So to clarify, conservation agriculture is a different farming system that prevents the loss of soil fertility while regenerating land that have been degraded by malpractices. I know for Belize, one of our biggest industries is tourism. And as you saw, COVID-19 can really shake up an industry, and tourism was shaken up for a while. So what Belize had to fall back on was agriculture. So it goes to show how important agriculture can be. And I think that implementing this type of system could be really beneficial in terms of just having something more sustainable.
Another solution would be enhancing crops with biofortification, as often the poorest families have limited resources in terms of land, labor, and financing.
By biofortification, we mean that the limited crops that are often grown like maize and beans are fortified to have higher levels of micronutrients like vitamin A and iron, which will benefit the families in short term.
As we briefly mentioned, improving food storage system is essential if we want to have our harvest last longer.
And we don't mean that it's necessary to build large storage facilities, but what can come to mind is the sun drying our vegetables and fruits has been a traditional way to preserve the nutrients for longer periods of time. Have you ever kind of experienced people doing that sort of thing where they try to preserve food and nutrients for a longer period of time?
Yeah, I know. I was actually thinking on a tradition we have in Guatemala. I'm really not sure if you do it in Belize, but in Guatemala, during Semana Santa, which is Holy Week, people normally go fish. And once they have their fish, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before Semana Santa, they actually dry the fish. So during Holy Week, they eat them. And this comes way back in time when they actually thought that you couldn't work or do anything for Holy Week. And now that we're mentioning it, I mean, we only use it as part of the tradition for Holy Week. But now that we mention it, it can also be used for storage food. So we can definitely use that.
Yeah, and expand upon it globally, really. Like you mentioned, like it can be spread out. It doesn't only have to be during this tradition.
I also do think that we should keep all these conversations going with the different members of our communities on what can be done locally for those who are either suffering or demonstrating any early sign of malnutrition.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a lot of work that can be done on the local level. I know a lot of local businesses who would be more than willing to really come together and maybe put in some policies. Maybe my restaurant doesn't have to throw away all of this excess food. Maybe we can give them out to a homeless shelter. Maybe we can even put together a program where we can actually go out and distribute the food to them ourselves. I feel like this is a great opportunity for lots of larger scale companies, restaurants, businesses to really come together, stand up and say, hey, what can I do to eliminate hunger in my town or city or community?
Indeed, and I do think here there are also some churches who sometimes do this about just having an open house, we can call it, and then people can just come in and eat.
Great example. Yeah, food drives are definitely something that can be implemented into every community, really. And actually, the United Nations Food System Summit hosted a virtual discussion that included chefs, indigenous people, youth activists, small farmers, and community leaders to transform our broken food systems.
Oh, really? I mean, I do think that that would have been a really great and interesting conversation, which I really hope become a yearly event. For those that are interested in rewatching the live stream, we have listed the link below in the description.
This is a great conversation that we had today, and we hope that our audience found it very informative as well, just as much as we did. And remember, no idea is too big to help in the fight against world hunger. And just to clarify, we should never also just be thinking about giving back leftovers. We should also just be giving out of our hearts to end world hunger.
Yes, most definitely. We need to contribute to get into this goal, which is not just a goal for an organization, but the world itself, to get to hunger zero.
Yeah, definitely. I think every single person has a responsibility, has a role to play in terms of ending world hunger.
Definitely. This episode wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Spanish Agency for International Development, Cooperación, and the Organization of American States for the space of dialogue between the youth of Belize and Guatemala.
Also, we'd just like to remind you that you can find us on Twitter at OEA_Belize Guade. You'll be able to stay up to date with everything that's happening in the Adjacency Zone.
And we would like to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we put a lot of effort, time into creating each episode for you.